Everybody, today is July 22nd, 2013. It is 4 p.m. I'd go ahead and like to call to order and do a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Shirley.
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Okay, if I can get everyone that is able to just stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations this afternoon, so I will go ahead and move on to citizen forums. This is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak regarding an item that is not on today's agenda. There's a race up there today. Goodness.
The first thing I would like to acknowledge is that the mayors and the city commissioners that are sitting right in front of me, I just wanted to say that you're doing a wonderful job. And the one thing about Aaron Householder is that keep it coming. I love it. And the good thing about you guys that you've been elected on your own behalf, not because you have a wealthy family or things were handing down to you. You've earned it the hard way. And thank you so much for well represent, and especially Mayor Shirley, I love you.
Well, thank you, but we still need your name and address.
Just in case you want to send a thank you card. Yeah.
Yes.
Tracy Sin at 340 and a half South Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tracy. I know there was another gentleman out here trying to get up to the podium. Your name and address, please.
My name is Daryl Smith. I represent the Muscular Dystrophy Association. My residence is 1412 Southwest 25th Street in Blue Springs, Missouri. The zip code is 64015. We are presenting you with some information today that will provide a little background and history on the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I promise I won't read that chapter and verse today. But we come before you today to ask the mayor and the commissioners to consider allowing the firefighters of Salina to join forces with firefighters throughout the state of Kansas and across America in conducting an American tradition we believe it's become, and that is since 1954, firefighters standing at select street corners and intersections throughout their towns and communities where they serve and protect the city and collect funds in their boots in the summertime or generally around Labor Day to raise money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association's life-saving mission of funding research, clinics, summer camps for children with muscular dystrophy, and our worldwide efforts to find causes and treatments for neuromuscular or muscle-related disorders. Many, many cities, and in your packet you will see there are many, many cities across the state of Kansas that allow their firefighters to collect in the street, and they raise literally untold thousands of dollars for MDA's mission. And we are just here today to ask the commissioners and the mayor to give us consideration to allow our firefighters to collect for MDA's mission this summer. Thank you.
And Jason, how does something like that work when they approach us like that and getting it onto a blue sheet so he can follow up? And
there are a lot of decision points with something like this. The first is in the standard traffic ordinance. It doesn't allow anyone to be in the roadway, but it does grant you the opportunity or the discretion to allow that in your own local community. So if you want to, you can allow folks in the roadway for collection purposes. I think some of the decision points you'll have, though, before you just carte blanche just do that, is one, the request was for firefighters, but in all fairness, MDA is one agency out there that does a lot of great things. We have a lot of others in our community and also national ones that may or may not have a presence in our community. We also have multiple other departments as well. And I think if I'm an employee, the first question might be, if I'm in general services, can we choose our favorite charity, and can we have time, possibly off duty, possibly on, using our resources to collect on the streets as well? And so that's a decision. It's a broader organizational decision that you have to enter into. And Mr. Smith and I have talked, and he's been wonderful and provided great information. There's some good examples of ordinances that deal with safety in the streets and things like insurance and some of that, and that's helpful, and I think that can help us to get to that part of it. The more difficult question is as we look at our entire organization, how we would apply such a thing and going forward with that. And that assumes that there's interest. I do think also, whether it's our folks or not, there's a question of, okay, I'm not a firefighter, but I have interest in one of the local agencies. There's just multiple ones to choose from, United Way, Red Cross, some of the others. And can they also gather volunteers and collect throughout the year? You're into questions about determining scheduling, determining quantity of days you can do that, maximum number of days, locations that are allowable, locations that aren't. And we can get to all those issues, but it's going to take quite a bit of work to have something that you're comfortable with. So those are some of the questions that we've dealt with that we've really, quite honestly, just felt were difficult nuts to crack in the whole issue of doing that. And then the other question is, if they're allowed to do on duty, that means that our employees are paid with the tax dollars for that purpose, that in essence the city is condoned for the collection for that particular entity. So if you have any thoughts about what entities, that comes into play at that time as well. There may be certain entities you don't like or for whatever reason don't want to have someone collect for, and that becomes a question too. And you don't have a lot of discretion on something like that so much. So it's really just a lot of questions about different ways to apply it fairly within the organization and the community, and those are the issues.
Right, but I think a lot of this, and with my experience in the MDA when I was younger, and I used to do a lot of volunteer work for this particular organization, it's usually volunteer firefighters that are not on duty. I do understand the ordinance that would have to be changed, as well as liability insurance if somebody were to get hurt volunteering. But in all actuality, do you really think the United Way or the Red Cross would come up? Because the MDA thing is a nationwide, and I think people are used to seeing the firefighters out on the street with the boots. And I don't think I personally don't think the United Way would come and say, "Hey, police officers, will you guys get your boots out and start doing this?"
I do think they would, and I'll tell you why. A couple of reasons. One is we have, in my opinion, some of the most active nonprofits in Salina compared to many other places I've been to. So things like that would be in their awareness. Two, one of the reasons I know one of the reasons that there's so much interest in this is because there's no question the amount of dollars that can be collected in this form versus the other means for MDA is going to be significantly higher. It's effective to be out in the street collecting, and so if others know it's effective, they may be interested. The third is my first job in Missouri was in a small town that you wouldn't think would know about these things, and they already had folks that collected, and we had to create a policy because we had issues about number of days and scheduling and giving somebody something once they pay so that they don't feel awkward the second time they go through that same intersection and they felt like they've already paid, but they don't want folks to look at them as if, well, they don't care about the entity and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff to think about, and I think there could be some interest in Salina.
Right. What about the homeless guys that stand on the corner with their hats out? I mean,
Are you asking if we could get them to collect for MDA?
No. I'm just saying, they can sit out there and collect money. I think the MDA should be able to.
Yeah, I haven't run across too many, but
we don't arrest those guys, and if they get hurt, I don't think we're liable for them getting hurt. So.
I would imagine, I would say there's probably been a kind, gentle, you're not supposed to do that every once in a while from a police officer, but without talking to Chief.
That was my attempt at a joke. But in all serious jokes aside, I did, when I was in third grade, I did raise quite a bit of money for the MDA through a skate-a-thon, and I skated for 12 hours at Skate Island in Grand Island, Nebraska. I even won a pair of roller skates.
Would you be willing
still have
to?
I would roller skate. I would
12 hours
I will
for
do a
MDA.
skate-a-thon.
Yeah.
It's on if it's roller skating.
Yeah.
I've skated with a couple of the roller derby girls, so they can vouch that I can skate pretty darn good. So, maybe that one doesn't go through. We could do something on that.
Yeah, they're a great organization, but you really don't have a lot of time between now.
No, on Labor Day. Yeah, that is
now,
really
if
short
you wanted
notice.
us to plan for next year, that gives us adequate time. If you said we want some kind of policy discussion, take us into study sessions, let's talk about those issues and see how we can figure that out. We'd be happy to do that.
Right.
Yeah, this is the downside of the world that we live in. It's one good idea if we knew that it was only the firefighters who would stick to doing this, and it was only going to be them who would say yes right away. But I fear that the same thing you do, and that is there'll just be more and more organizations, which is fine. I think if the people of Salina want to keep giving and it's worthwhile, and we have charities making money hand over fist, fantastic. I don't know what the best way to arrive at that is, you know, and I want to see things like this happen, but I want to make sure that we don't get into every day of the week there's somebody standing on the corner, you know, collecting. And while these guys have historically been the group that we associate with it, I fear that that could be tainted by other groups coming in. And so I just, you know, I want to look towards doing something like this, but I don't know how we get there, and I'd definitely be open to, you know, with more discussions about it to try and get us there.
Yeah, and my point in bringing those issues to you is not to suggest that you shouldn't consider it.
Right.
It's just to suggest that if we go down the road of looking at those issues, it's going to take a little bit of time, and then you'll be in the position of determining with each of those questions what you'd like to do or not do, what concerns you, or what you're comfortable with. And we'd be happy to be able to do that. I just, between now, if you're looking at an approach that would provide the community with the same opportunity to craft that between now and Labor Day would be extremely difficult, given many of the
Right,
other
because
things
we have Monday off
But
next
between now
week.
and next year sometime,
Right.
it's probably not that difficult.
Sure.
Right.
Let's go back a little bit. You guys were talking about with them on duty. Does that have to do something about the uniforms, or was there?
There's a few things. As right now, it's sort of informally, I would say, probably for the last 20 years, are the primary nonprofits that city employees have been allowed time to collect for or participate with more directly would be the United Way and the food collection program, Project Salina. I don't really know. I don't think there's a history in writing. I suspect the reason is because both of those take dollars and give them directly to entities that are in Salina right now versus indirectly.
Sure.
And both the United Way, has kind of a broad umbrella over quite a few agencies, so it makes it a pretty easy pick versus picking and choosing. And certainly Project Salina and food just really is kind of a community-wide thing. That's why I suspect that that's been the case. We've just kind of been riding on that practice for some time.
Sure.
It doesn't mean you can't change that. Like I said, there's no formal policy on that. So that's kind of the first thing is do we want to open up and do we want to change how we give? I suspect, I could be wrong, I suspect if we did have a different policy like that, some of the entities that have not been able to participate or get folks to collect for them would be eager to say, okay, this is kind of good. Those like the United Way might say, oh, boy, that could have a watered-down effect, right, wrong, or otherwise. So there's going to be some opinions on the matter. But again, different communities do different things. I think, again, that's why you take the policy questions and analyze them and decide what you want to do.
I guess the core of my question was more about, are they being paid while they're doing this?
Oh, in those cases, there are certain activities of which, yeah, they were doing them while they're on duty.
My fears are is that by the time you figure their insurance, their pay, on and on, are they raising as much as they're costing the citizens to be standing out there?
Right.
You hope so.
Yeah, I was
But
pretty
I mean,
sure it
at
was
some
all
point, as this gets
volunteers.
watered down and these guys make the equivalent of about $50 an hour with their benefits and health and everything else, I may be high in the numbers. I'm sure they're at the office right now complaining. But I mean, the true idea of volunteerism is that you do it free and
Yes.
selfless. And the
I
idea to be
agree.
paid on the staff seems
I have a slightly
counter
different
to
take
that.
on this. And just from living in other communities that have done this and participated in it, I think of a lot of our concerns in actuality don't really happen. And that is that what I've noticed is that the fire department has been pretty much exclusively with this organization as an
Correct.
event. I don't think
Yeah.
firefighters are going to say, let's get out every other weekend and hold our, it's hot in the stuff that they're wearing, and they're out there doing this. As far as, I'm not particularly that concerned about firefighters doing it on duty. I think that the benefit that you can couple with being a really nice community outreach and giving people opportunity to interact with firefighters, and just, I've witnessed a lot of kids that love to go in and toss the
Yep.
money in because it's, they're their heroes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things, and there are already precedents with other organizations doing this. The postal carriers collect food, and
United
not
Way has
everybody
United
says we want to
Lion.
go. That's a great way to do it. We want to go collect different things in
Different
different ways.
ways.
I think that United Way and some of these other organizations may see it as like some of these a great way to do this, but I think that there's a lot of respect among the different organizations that they kind of tend to not step on each other's toes too much. Maybe I could be wrong on some of that, but I'm thinking that, like I said, living in other communities, I haven't really seen, the only people I ever see collecting in the street are firefighters for around the Labor Day time period.
Yeah.
And people selling
We-
roses.
Well, we had
That's in
probably in a
California.
town of about 7,000, we had at least a dozen entities collecting. I don't expect the firefighters themselves to want to be getting involved in too many other things. And if we allow on duty at this point, given we've done that, it's been sort of contained with the program we've had so far. But I think there's going to be a policy question, which is, okay, I think we're going to say to ourselves, as an organization, as a government organization that's tax funded, we wish to spend some of our time to assist certain nonprofit agencies. And the question is going to be which ones, because I think that does open up the question, which is okay. I just want you to be aware of that issue. And how much time, how many hours would we say an employee would be allowed, regardless of the entity, to spend time on it? Those are just the policy questions we need to hit so that we're clear. Because the last thing we want to do is have a situation in which we allow one department to go out for a certain agency and we say, well, I'm sorry, you can't do the other agency. And so it kind of takes us from growing out of the current approach that we've had for some time, which quite honestly was probably due for a conversation anyway, but to a much broader policy question. And again, I'm not suggesting you don't do that. I'm just saying it takes some time to hit all those issues: on duty, off duty, use of city resources, which means city sponsorship versus not.
Right.
To get you into which entities should be approved and which ones should not and why. Scheduling certain ones, like, for example, MDA presumably wants to be around Labor Day. That makes pretty good sense. Certain entities have those particular dates. Certain ones don't. You still could have competition for a date. What's your system for determining who gets what date if we have, say, a dozen or 15 or so entities in town that would like to participate and do it because they're kind of hurting too through the recession and collection of finances or funds and so forth. Those are just policy questions we need to hit on the presumption that others might want to be interested in it, and also with the internal equity within our employees and their desire to do the same thing.
Have you, ladies and gentlemen, have you run across some of this before, obviously, in other towns, and how have you addressed it?
I was hoping someone would ask. Indeed, in fact, I personally have had the tremendous pleasure of working with many cities throughout the Midwest for the past 20 years on this very issue. In fact, there's a handout in your packet that is headed In-Street Collections Ordinance Considerations, and this addresses many of the things that Mr. Gage points out that are things that need to be looked at in terms of how do you regulate and make sure that groups that are doing this do it in a very safe and effective manner. And many of these are all, I can assure you, are First Amendment constitutionally friendly ways that would allow the City of Salina to enact an ordinance very quickly, in fact, that would regulate the process, allow any group that met the criteria to do so, including proof of liability insurance, naming the city and the participants as additionally insured, making sure that it is only done for legitimate 501c3 IRS tax-exempt organizations, to make sure that all of the ways in which the activity is conducted is done by groups and organizations that are adult, no one under the age of 18. They are safe, they are professional organizations. And I would also mention, to one of the other points that was brought up, is the on-duty versus off-duty issue. In my experience in over 29 years with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, the majority of the firefighters that are professional firefighters, as they are here in Salina, do collect on duty, but at the same time they are still in full service and protection to the city, and they are ready to drop their boots in the truck and go respond to any call. In fact, in my experience in visiting with some of these firefighters over nearly 3 decades, in many cases, not at the fire station, at an adjacent intersection, if you will. They're actually a little closer to where they need to be to respond to a call. So these are all excellent points that Mr. Gage brings up. All of your questions are very pertinent to the issue, and I would agree with the earlier gentleman that I believe it seems to me the City of Salina is well served by their commission and the mayor, and I thank you for asking these deep questions. And I would offer, if it would be appropriate, to meet with any of you at a time of your convenience to delve deeper into these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And
See, he knew how to come at us. You see that? You see
And
that?
I
He
have
was
another
nice.
gentleman that would like to come up and speak.
Who said it's by man's stomach? Sometimes vanity and all is just that. Yeah.
Well, My name is Rick Nicholson. I'm a retired firefighter from Salina. First, I'd like to say that I think this can be done because it is being done in so many communities across the state. We may be one of the only ones that don't allow it. But if I could, I'd like to give a little bit of history of how it was done in Salina and how I think it's being done now. I started in 1978, and what happened in 1978, the firefighters, Local 782, would organize off-duty personnel. Nobody was paid. The fire department would loan us backup reserve trucks to put on display at the intersections and allow us to wear uniforms. Okay? It worked pretty well. And of course, back then, the money that we dealt with, and we did a pretty good job of raising money. I don't remember, I was just a young kid then, how much they raised. I wasn't in the money counting department. But it went on that way for quite a few years. Then there were probably, I don't know what caused it. It certainly wasn't the fault of the Jason Gage or Chief Mulliken because they weren't around then. Well, I think maybe there was some hard feelings. Some reason it wasn't allowed anymore. It got to where they couldn't borrow the trucks. They have to get rural fire department trucks. They could not wear the uniforms, and they could not go in the street. Well, so they'd go to Target and collect money, or Walmart or whatever store would allow them to go in the parking lot, and they would get next to no money raised for this fine charity. Then something happened. And I don't know how this happened, but September 11th, 2001, with the tragedy, boot brigades were fired up across the United States. And we were allowed to go back into the street again, well, sort of. We went to the major intersections in Salina. We took fire trucks from, I believe, the rural fire departments, loaned them to us. And I think we were allowed to wear our uniforms. I can't really remember. Again, all this off duty with nobody being paid. Firemen work, volunteer work for free. Some people, we were like Green Lantern at Iron, and the busiest intersections in town. Some people didn't like it, but most people did like it. Families would drive through so each kid could put the money in the boot, and it was just a good thing for the charity. And the people up in New York who lost all those people, they really, really needed the money. Well, that day we raised those 2 days we raised $72,000 for that charity. $72,000. And now I don't know what they made when they had to go to Target or Kmart. Nothing against those businesses if they're trying to help out. But it just wasn't the same. I know they didn't raise that type of money. And that dollar amount alone should show you, the passion that the people of Salina had for donating. And it meant a lot to them, largely because, of what happened in New York. But they liked the firemen, and it was a good charity, and everybody likes to go throw money in the boot. And if they don't, they just drive on through. It's no big deal. Nobody ever got hurt. And, the charity that we're talking about, MD, and maybe it wouldn't seem as important as it did on 9/11, but I think that Bob over here sitting in this wheelchair all his life, I think it's pretty important to him. And I think it's important to a lot of people. And I think it means a lot to a lot of people. It means a lot to the firemen here. And, I think it'd be a good opportunity for the city and the fire department to work together and make it into a big winner for everyone. Any questions I could answer?
No, but thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thanks,
For the
Rick.
history of that. Appreciate it.
I have a comment. I hate to be this Grinch that stole Christmas, but I was going to use the example of the Red Kettles, Salvation Army. Once again, a great organization, but it's the same sort of concept where I call it confrontational giving, where everybody has a pure heart and you give because you want to. but once again, you're repeatedly asked to give. And it's at a certain point during that time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you start not trying to avoid the Salvation Army kettle because you've already given $100 or whatever it is you had budgeted. But you want to help, and you want to make a difference. But and MD is a great cause. It's just that at a certain point, you feel obligated instead of out of a true concern to give to the organization. So I have a hesitation about participating in that. And actually, if they hear that anybody out in the audience hears that you can raise $70,000 in one day, I think we'd have.
That was also
Have
for
a special,
9/11.
Well, it was
Yeah.
maybe a special deal. Now, I don't know what other communities raise with the firefighters. I imagine it's a considerable sum, though.
Yeah.
And I would think it's probably enough money that it would induce other organizations to come out and spend one day to really bring in some bucks.
I haven't experienced that being around people that have been a part of the MDA thing and the fire, and they've been in places where in much bigger cities than Salina. And one of the things that I think is a great thing about living in a small town is we can do things like this. I think the bigger city you get, the harder it would be to be able to do this kind of thing. So I think, I think you're going to have a few Grinches like yourself. But I think most people, they kind of have that small hometown feeling of, yeah, I can suck it up for this, and even if it kind of bugs me, I'm not going to let anybody see me perturbed by it.
And I do believe I do have another gentleman that would like to come up and speak, since this is the citizen forum, and this really is it really a debate? It's just the
No, I
citizens
don't think
forum
there's
to
debate.
come up and ask some questions.
I don't think debate's going on. I think we're all trying to find the heart of the matter.
I'll be quick, though.
Take your time.
My name's Steve Audie. I'm also a retired Salina firefighter, but also currently I'm a National Chief Officer for the American Red Cross. I'm Mass Care Chief Officer. I was the Chief Officer for Sandy. I was the Chief Officer for the Moore, Oklahoma here just recently. I can tell you, today we're talking about MDA, but as the Red Cross, you cannot believe how important it is for our organizations to have the firefighters and other organizations do this for us. We, the Red Cross, do not stand on the corner. We don't do the red bucket. The other folks do that. We don't do that. Everybody really has their own way of doing things. But, to address a little bit about what you said, I seen in New York City people bringing money into fire stations and leaving it with firefighters for the victims in Sandy. So it's very, very important to support the firefighters' efforts in fundraising. As the Red Cross, we support local house fire victims. We do tell them some of this money that they're getting for their night stay in the motel, their clothes, their whatever, comes from local firefighters, some of the efforts that they do, and that shines a very bright light on the city of Salina, the good that's done by the firefighters. So don't think that the money that's raised by the firefighters or the police officers or the sanitation people, that light doesn't shine back on you, the city of Salina and the commissioners, because it does. And it's very important that we allow local organizations the mechanism to help their own city and the rest of the country. And today we're talking about MDA. Tomorrow we could be talking about somebody else, but it's very important that we allow them to do this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Would anyone else from the audience like to come up and speak?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Robert Wing. My address is 7540 Leavenworth Road in Kansas City. I'm an active fire captain in Kansas City. Also serve as president of the Kansas State Council of Firefighters, and I have a list of cities here that
I have that list.
that allow firefighters on duty, both large and small, to collect in the streets and have for a period of years. I've served in Kansas City on the board of United Way. For over a decade, I've served on the board of Red Cross. For over a decade, these issues never come up, at least on the boards that I've served on. The gentleman who made the comment that, for lack of a better term, every organization knows its turf, that is exactly the way this is handled. It's handled very professionally. I just want to say, in my 37 years as a firefighter in Kansas City, we've never missed a year collecting. And on the Kansas side, we put 22 pieces of apparatus on the streets for 3 days, every day, with every firefighter volunteering on duty. They don't have to collect. It's a volunteer thing while they're on duty to make this thing happen. In the Kansas City metro alone, just the 2 Kansas cities, not OP, not any of the suburbs in Kansas or Missouri, there's 60-some pieces of apparatus just in the 2 Kansas cities that's coordinated to put on-duty personnel on the street, respond from those corners, and what Darrell said is exactly true. Sometimes it is more effective where we're at on the streets as collectors for this organization than we were in our station houses. I'm telling you, it's very successful, and I'll end it on this note. One of the worst mistakes the city council at the time ever made in my city was addressing the homeless issue of people standing on the corners, that of which I've heard. So they enacted an ordinance where there would be no collections on the street, period, for no one, no organization. And the community went crazy. We didn't have to turn a tap to get back on those streets. As firefighters for MDA, the community took care of it for us. It is such a tremendous PR tool for the city, for the firefighters, for the elected officials. It is a win-win situation for everybody. I would urge you look into this, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. As Darrell said, there's plenty of ordinances enacted right now in this state that take up the considerations that you're going to be faced with should you move forward on this. And I would suggest that take Mr. Smith up on his offer to at least discuss the matter, because in depth, I too appreciate your time. It is such an important issue to not only the firefighters in the community, but the people that we help. That's the number one issue right here. We take care of Jerry's kids, and we're asking you to allow the firefighters to do it such that most firefighters in the state of Kansas do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to touch on this issue? Since we have no other comment on this particular one, I am going to ask Mr. Gage, because it is such short timing to Labor Day. I know there wouldn't be a way to do it in a timely manner in the next 5 weeks, but I would like to look into it for next year, if that would be possible to start looking into that for next year.
I don't know that I feel like we can't get it done in
You
that
think we
short
can get it done? Can we get it done that
short of
fast?
time. I mean, it's
Well-
going to be a rush, but I mean, what's the feelings of the commission?
If we can get it done that fast,
Here's
that's
where I would
great.
rather go with it. I understand your concerns, and I think it just shows the community what an excellent city manager we have that looks at every aspect of what can happen, and I hope that that's what people take away from here. I'm always more of a gambler, as I have sometimes in the past on different things. My thoughts are, I kind of tend to agree with Commissioner Blanchard. I don't think we're going to have an outpouring of people trying to do this. If we do, then we'll readdress the issue, but I'm more willing to gamble and say, let's do it. If it becomes a problem, let's pull it away. But, you know, I respect Mr. Nicholson, and I know he's been around. And I mean, in your years of collecting, do you recall there ever being a bunch of organizations coming out trying to take over, or was it pretty much the firemen? Yeah, and that's my thoughts, too. I think we'll do that. But for some reason, if something does happen, and we have that, then maybe we have to readdress the issue then. But I kind of feel like that most, my brother's been in charities for years. I think he worked for MDA probably when you were there. I don't know if John, yeah, I thought he did. And so he's done his whole life. And in most charitable organizations, they do kind of know where their place is. And again, I completely appreciate the city manager looking this over, but you know, I just think that it is kind of an accepted. It's like the bell ringers, which it may feel confrontational, but you know, it's just kind of an Americana kind of thing for me. I expect to see the boots. I also expect to see Dalmatians. I'm still mad our fire station doesn't have Dalmatians, but that's a whole other
They
thing.
do
We'll
have
work.
a nice dog, though. It's
Do
not
they?
a dog.
Yeah, they do have a
They
nice
they
dog.
have the
If they could
Sparks.
paint some spots on them, I'd feel better about it.
Sparky
but,
or whatever the name is, Smokey.
yeah.
I don't know. The
But
little dog that smells out the bombs.
It looks
Or
like they've got a pretty
the
good policy here. I mean, on this, could we, how quick does this need to take place?
I think one question is, why would you limit it to 501c3s?
I mean,
See, there's when when the city of Salina, a taxing entity government organization, chooses to support, whether it be private or nonprofit, you need to have a reason to do that, and that's what creates, in this case, a process. It's not to say that you can't.
Sure.
I would think that the city attorney would like to probably look at various aspects of that process when you do that. And that's what takes the time. I can get you any kind of ordinance if you want to do it, but I'm not going to get you one that fairly addresses the opportunity for the rest of the community, whether they're interested or not. We have to provide that opportunity. That's a legal obligation. I will not have time with regards to our budget time and special assessments and the other projects to address the internal equity of our employees and the opportunity for others from a certain point forward to deal with the question of, well, Jason, we've always wanted to go pick an entity and raise money for them. I really don't have time to do that before Labor Day either. Those are the big questions. Can I get people on the street? I can get them on the street. Will it be proper and equitable? No. It won't. I mean, I just honestly can tell you that, but we can draft any kind of ordinance to do it. But there are policy things that you haven't thought about yet that you really need to think about, and that's what takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So that's really the policy issue.
I would be in favor of let's looking at the situation a little bit and looking at it for next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
And when
too.
we say next year,
I
I'm
don't-
not shooting for Labor Day. I'd be shooting for the end of the year.
Right.
Because there are a whole lot of entities in town that need money and need it bad, and I think you're going to be surprised with the interest you might get if they now know that they can be on the street. I would tell you in those other communities, there's probably a culture there in which they expect the firefighters to do that. And that's not a majority of communities in Kansas, by the way. It's a small number when you look at the total number. But nonetheless, that's okay. But I think you're going to be surprised in Salina because they're going to say, now, great, we can do that. We need to decide and talk about it as an entity or a nonprofit, whether we wish to or not, and then try to reserve that date and kind of get into that thing. I think we will find some interest. I'd be surprised if we didn't because they're very progressive nonprofits in Salina. So I anticipate we will see interest.
Sure.
Well, let's get the interest with the MDA. Let's look into that. The legalities, Mr. Bingston, in a timely manner by the end of the year. I'm not going to rush you because we do have special assessments.
Yeah, we do have
a budget.
we do have a lot on our plate.
We have a lot on our plate the next 4 weeks, and we are
Yeah, but
the
we can
fifth
shoot for
Monday
the end
next
of the year
Monday.
and
We don't
see.
have our session next Monday, so that is pretty short notice. But I would like to get that on a blue sheet and on our agenda in the near future. I would appreciate that because I think it's an important, and I'll agree to disagree with you on other organizations trying to jump on the bandwagon with this, and we'll leave it at that.
And if they do, I mean, we'll just know who not to donate to.
Right.
So we'll say, hey, sorry.
I can't pass up lemonade stands.
No, me neither. Does anyone else? I know we're done with that. Thank you, gentlemen,
Yeah,
all of
thanks,
you for
ladies
coming
and
up. We are still in citizen forums. Is there anyone that would like to approach the commissioners on anything other than what we just talked about that is not on the agenda today? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, comments on the proposed 2014 budget.
Okay, this is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak regarding the budget. It's not a formal public hearing, but if anybody would like to come up and address anything on our 2014 proposed budget, feel more than welcome to come up.
Now, see, I don't want any complainers
I know,
out there
no
who
complainers.
say they didn't have
Yes.
the opportunity to talk to the city about this, that, and how we spend our money because we had today's meeting available for the entire public to come out and complain how we spend your money.
And it's online.
So I don't expect to see any comments on the forums or anything else complaining about how your money was spent.
On to our consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of July 15, 2013. Item 6.2, award a contract for the manhole and wastewater pump station rehabilitation, project number 132965, to Mayor Specialty Services, LLC, in the amount of $191,091, with the 5% construction contingency, and the total amount of $205,896. Item 6.3, award of contract for the wastewater pump station rehabilitation at pump stations numbers 39 and 55, project number 132982, to Walters Morgan Construction Incorporated, in the amount of $181,100, with a 5% construction contingency in the amount, for a total amount of $192,255.
Is there anything that a commissioner would like removed or amended from the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I have a correction for the minute. And under the citizen forum, the name John Boesen should be spelled B-O-E-S-E-N.
Is that the only correction?
That's the only correction.
Can we correct John Bozen's name in our spell check there, Madam Clerk? Thank you. Is there anything else anybody would like corrected or removed from our consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion. to
Mayor,
approve.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on our consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Consent agenda with the amendment approves 5-0. On to development business.
Item 7.1, authorize submittal of an application to the Kansas Department of Commerce for the 2013 Downtown Commercial Rehabilitation Grant. Sub-item 7.1A, resolution number 137023, certifying legal authority to apply for the 2013 Kansas Small Cities Community Development Block Grant. Item 7.1B, resolution number 137024, declaring a building blighted with respect to the Kansas Small Cities Community Development Block Grant. Item 7.1C, resolution number 137025, providing for the residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan.
Mr. Hobby.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mayor and City Commissioners, we appreciate the fact that you'll be able to bring back to you the second round of a downtown rehabilitation grant. If you remember back in January, we applied for the Department of Commerce downtown rehabilitation contract. These are new grants this year. This is the first time they've offered the grants to any communities within the city. We were unsuccessful in the first round. The first round went to three businesses, or business buildings, in three communities of Junction City, Concordia, and Beloit. Those buildings were all in the 1880s vintage, and so therefore we were unsuccessful at that time. But they do have remaining about $238,700 in the grant funds, and so we have, on behalf of Assurance Partners, LLC, requesting from you to allow us to resubmit for the second round in August of this year for the Downtown Rehabilitation Grant. This grant was offered to three different communities this last time. We're hoping that the second round of grants will not have as many grant recipients or requests as we did the last time. We have a very good grant, we feel like, this time that we can present to the Department of Commerce. Some of the main things that have changed since the first round grant is the fact that Assurance Partners LLC is now the sole owner of the structure in the southwest corner of 5th and Iron Streets. You'll see some of the pictures in the background of the existing building. Mr. Berger has taken some pictures, as well as they have an application for the Downtown Review Board that will be heard on Thursday of this week for the demolition of the exteriors and remodeling and those types of processes, and we'll go through that board this week. Today we have for you a request for a downtown rehabilitation grant for the period or the value of $238,000. The main use of the structure of these funds, will be used on the exterior of the structure. And John, after he gets through with the pictures of the existing building, he's going to show you two different facade pictures. The first one would be the extra. If the grant was not awarded, this is what the structure would actually look like in appearance on the outside corner of the building. And then his second picture rendering will be of the structure if the grant is awarded. We're hoping that very much that the Department of Commerce will see the changes of this structure downtown will be very forthcoming with the fact that they would like to see Salina improve our downtown area. We have today a grant that has been placed in front of you. We've got some minor changes that will need to be made to that grant. One is we have completed the relocation of the address of that structure. It's been approved and moved to move that address to 201 East Iron, and so we'll be changing the grant application to reflect that process. Phil Klima was very instrumental in the very first grant process, and she was very instrumental in the second round of the grants, and we have modified it slightly with assistance of Pat Mills from Assurance Partners, LLC. We also have in the audience today other representatives from the Assurance Partners, Christy Balthazar and Jim Wilson, principals in the business of Assurance Partners. We would ask for you today to do three separate steps. One would be a resolution certifying the legal authority, has been mentioned by the city clerk, we will be able to apply for a 2013 downtown rehabilitation grant. The second is to declare this structure, that 201 East Iron, a blight, excuse me, with respect to the Small Cities Kansas Community Development Block Grant funds. And the third thing will be to approve providing the residential anti-displacement form that is required by the grant application. Please note that the structure is empty at this time. The whole facility has been completely emptied, and there will be no anti-displacement issues for this structure, but is a requirement of the grant. And one of the things that we were reduced in our grant points for this last time was the fact that we did not have an anti-displacement form. So we want to make sure that is completed today. So we have today a public hearing that you will be able to accept any comments from anybody from the public, either pro or con of this application of this grant for us. We also have representatives from Assurance Partners, LLC, here who would be more than glad to talk to you about the project. And I'd stand for any questions for this project, if you would.
Any questions for staff?
Mr. Hobby, when the state looks at these, I kind of took note of the buildings that they gave our money to, and nice buildings in Concordia, kind of a gorgeous building, and the nice building in Beloit. I'm not familiar with the other one. It was where was
Junction City.
Okay, I'm not familiar with which building over there got it, but I did know the other two from my travels. Do they look, this is more of just a point of reference, do they look at what the building will do after it becomes part of community from a taxable view or anything, or do they just say, hey, we just think this is a neat old building and there's a need for it, we're going to put money into it, or do they say, hey, when we're done with this building, it's going to be a $600,000 building, it's going to help the local tax base? Does that enter anywhere into the equation at all? Or
When discussion with Mr. Marlin from the Department of Commerce, he indicated that the first three buildings were an 1880s vintage, and their goal at the first round was to repair a structure that could be on a demolition list, if you would say so, with a short period of time. The majority of the other applications from the state of Kansas were like ours. They're renovating a building downtown to be proposed to be used for other projects. And that's where we feel like we were a few points short of being able to make the cut. But now we have changed that, and then Assurance Partners LLC is now the sole owner of the structure, and we feel like the owners going back in after the grant will be a better process for us, a better application.
So really preservation is almost more of their goal, which is fine. Which, like I said, the buildings that I know of are beautiful buildings, and I'm glad they're putting money into them. But from my own personal thoughts of how the process ran, I wanted what sort of was the driving factor behind. And
there was only 3 grants given, and we placed number 4 in the state. So I think we have a very good opportunity this time.
Great, thank you.
And the main difference is the address.
The main thing, yes, from the paperwork you have in front of us is I've got a couple spelling errors I need to change.
Okay.
When you type too fast in my age, you get spelling errors. And you also change the address on the application.
And then the rendering we're looking at now is with the grant?
That is with the grant.
And can we see the one without, if the grant is not? Okay. And that's without. It would still be the same address change?
Yes, it'll still have the same address.
And then what does this do for not getting awarded the grant this time? If you're applying in August, can you tell us what the award and then possible construction periods may be?
The demolition for the structure interior work has already been started. The exterior will start after the Development Review Board has reviewed the plans on Thursday. And so they would be planning on removing a structure on the west side, and the actual catwalk or the area that walks between the old motel and this structure will begin shortly. They have a plan to be in the structure completely remodeled in March of 2014. So it's pretty proactive as far as their remodeling is concerned.
That's awesome. Good deal.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this issue? I know we had, I would say, I thought we had some people out there from Assurance.
I'm Jim Wilson, president of Assurance Partners, and I reside at 1160 South Marymount. And Gary, thank you for all your assistance in the assembly of the reapplication. We really appreciate the opportunity to go to the well one more time and see if we can't be successful, because we view this as an opportunity one time to do it right. And we plan on making a sizable financial investment in this facility. We think we're better positioned today because we own it, and we have detailed plans on what it is we're exactly trying to accomplish with it. And I think if we could break it down into two different components for your thought and consideration, I think not only the grant is important, you can see a substantial difference in the exterior of the property. We think it will be a showcase for all the city of Salina to enjoy, and very tactfully saying compared to what we have been not able to enjoy. But secondarily, I think whether it's doing a great job with lighting, doing a great job with water distribution, with concrete sidewalks, really we've got a chance to partner with one another, and we're asking the city to strongly consider really making an investment with us. And we think if we were just standing here with our hands out on a one-way street, we'd say, yeah, we get it. You guys hear that all the time. But we're really asking the city's consideration to do this right one time. So thanks again for your consideration.
Thank you.
Does this grant require the participation of the company as well in terms of funds?
Yes, they would like to know what the actual structure is going to be used for at the end product, and they do require match from the individual agency or the entity applying for the grant. In this case, it would be the individual agency of Assurance Partners, LLC, and they have a pretty extensive investment already in the structure themselves, as well as their loan that they are obtaining from the local lending institution to make sure this project goes.
I just had a quick question on the fiscal note on this, and I noticed that the grant administration fees, $18,000 or $18,800,
That's right, correct.
does that all go to North Central, or do we get some of that also?
No, all the grant funds for the grant administration would go to North Central Regional Planning Commission. $17,000 would be for the actual administration of the grant itself, and $1,800 would be for the finalization of the environmental review process for Department of Housing and Urban Development.
And so other than what we're doing here now, it pretty much goes to North Central, and they're in charge of it from here?
They're in charge of it from here.
Okay,
That's right.
great.
Not that I've been a big, huge fan of the facade improvement, and not that a max of $15,000 is a big in the chunk of this, but could that also be added to this project for whatever reason? I know we have, there's Phil. I didn't know if she left. Maybe she could help with that. Oh, yeah.
I'm Phil Kleeman with Salina Downtown, and our facade review team, which Mayor Shirley sat on, has already awarded a $15,000 forgivable loan on this property.
Okay, good, good. Just, again, anything that we can do to sort of, I don't think we're going to have a problem with the blight. So I just want to make sure that we're using all the tools in our, I mean, that's what it's there for. Like I said, I haven't necessarily been a big supporter of it, but if it's there and it's usable, and in this particular case,
Well, not only the facade grant, but is eligible for the neighborhood revitalization plan.
Sure.
as well as special redevelopment areas, so building permit fees would be reduced as well.
I think this project goes, well, I'll keep my extemporization short, but I think it really goes to what we've sort of been pushing for, at least
Straight
myself as a commissioner from day one, and that is finding organizations in this community that see value in using these tools that we give, and see value in moving into our older areas of town, and it really is, I think, a win for the community, and hopefully a win for them, and it really just sort of summarizes all the things that are possible when you put these things together. So very good. I'm glad.
And I appreciate all the hard work they've done in trying to get it right the first time. I really do appreciate that, because we have had situations where people have to come back over and over again, and that it gets a little frustrating sometimes. So I really am glad you did touch that on getting it right the first time. That is great. If anyone else has any questions for staff or for Assurance Partners? Okay. Any other comments from the audience? Okay. I would go ahead and entertain a motion. And on this particular motion, since there are 3 different items kind of here, we can do it in one motion if we please.
That would be fine, yes.
Okay.
We can do one motion on all 3?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be appropriate in this case.
Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 13-7023, 13-7024, and 13-7025.
Second.
I Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Item 7.2, application Z13-1, PDD 13-1, 1A, requesting a change in zoning classification from unzoned railroad right-of-way to PDD I-2 on property located on the north side of Schilling Road, east of Centennial Road.
Mr. Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. The property in question that we're talking about here is a piece of property that is essentially unzoned, abandoned railroad right-of-way. It's located between flood control right-of-way for a levee that it's out in the old base housing area, and I-2 zone property owned by the Salina Airport Authority, which fronts on Centennial Road. And this property dates back to the 1800s when the Missouri Pacific Railroad acquired right-of-way here, and it was part of a line that served Lindsborg. The Missouri Pacific Railroad abandoned its active use of this section of line in 1988. The rail lines and rail ties have been removed through a quiet title action in Saline County District Court. Storage Mart LLC has acquired full title to the property. The reason for the involvement of the Planning Commission and the City Commission is that because this is property that was historically railroad right-of-way, it has no zoning classification, and it was never included in any subdivision plat. So we had an application that was filed both to zone the property, not from a current zoning classification to a new one, but to establish zoning on it for the first time, and then a companion application to plat the property. And the importance of platting is not just to establish the boundaries of a piece of property, but one of the most important aspects of platting is to have the identification of public and franchise utilities that are on a property, and to protect those utilities with utility easements that are in the right dimensions are in the right place. And your role as city commissioners in the platting process is to accept the dedications that are associated with a plat. This has been brought to you today because the Planning Commission conducted their last public hearing on this item on June 18th, and we have a provision in the Salina zoning ordinance that calls for recommendations from the Planning Commission to go before the City Commission within 40 days, or the application would be considered expired. As staff, we don't feel like the companion plat item was ready to bring to you before or now. Since this blue sheet was prepared, I have received a plat drawing that does indicate the location of all existing utilities that cross this property, which includes several sets of overhead electric lines, a public water line, and a sewer line. And of course, we want to get easements for those. We also want to make sure that none of the building footprints proposed are over or under any of those easements. So we brought this to you and identified 4 alternatives based on the Planning Commission's recommendation. One would be to acknowledge receipt of their recommendation regarding the zoning of this property, but postpone consideration of that application until a plat that accounts for all existing utilities is ready for the Commission's consideration. As I noted, that is a work in progress. I just took plats today to all the various utility agencies to get their review and comments. You could also indicate your agreement with the Planning Commission's recommendation and direct staff to prepare an ordinance zoning this property to Planned Development District I-2 for your future consideration in conjunction with the plat. After reviewing all the information in the report, you could send this application back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration if you give them guidance as to what items you'd like to see reconsidered, or you could deny the request providing your reasons for doing that. if you have 4 votes in favor of such action. As staff, we didn't want this application simply to expire because of the 40-day period, so our recommendation is alternative 1 at this time, recognizing that we have a plat out now that is under review, and we'll be getting feedback from the various utility providers. There's a lot of detail in the report about the development plan itself, but I just wanted to focus on the timing and procedural aspects, but I'd be open to any questions you have about anything in our report.
I have a question about the rails to trails concept. I see here that part of any trail would be used by this facility if it goes forward as proposed, correct?
That is correct, and on advice from Mr. Bankston, although the comprehensive plan makes reference to that, it is not, since we don't have any defined plan for that or anything in place, we can't really use that as a basis to say this is not developable property, but the concept of rails to trails is to maintain the rail corridor and to convert that over time into bicycle trails. But this would become a piece of private development. We can't do anything about it now anyway because it's under private ownership. It's no longer under railroad ownership. So basically, this would be a private ownership that would effectively block the connectivity of the rail corridor, but there are other private owners who are also trying to acquire title to the abandoned rail line as well.
So are there other portions of the right-of-way that have been acquired by private owners then?
Not yet. This is the first where they've actually acquired quiet title.
It seems like that the rails to trails is pretty popular other places, and it just seems to me that it's, unless there was some way to connect outside of the area that's been acquired for this project, it would be I think it would be a good thing to have as an option, because it looks like with the trail system that we have in Salina right now, that we're kind of moving in that direction anyway.
This is one of the few sections where that has been, where the rail lines and tracks have actually been removed. Other places it's not in service, but those things have not been. But there is a process at the federal level through the Surface Transportation Board where railroads are supposed to go through a formal abandonment process, and there is an opportunity to rail bank those properties, but that window has closed in this particular corridor.
Mm-hmm. And am I correct, and maybe this is a question for Bankston, that cannot be part of our deciding factor, really? I mean, from a legal standpoint, is that what he was kind of trying to indicate?
You mean in relation to this particular
right
track? Yes, that would be my understanding, that the process has undergone or has occurred to transition this particular segment to private ownership.
Sure. So probably shouldn't be part of our, if we were to deny it, part of our reasoning. Well, I agree completely. I mean, that I think that the rails to trails would be fantastic. I think we're in a different realm now that this has gone into private ownership. We basically have to get eminent domain to get this section back. I mean, we're talking about a whole different issue.
That's correct. But I think I took it just as discussion of that concept. So at the point in time that you get to the point of developing a basis for whatever the decision might be, we will need to be watchful for that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Was that decision to allow private ownership part of this right-of-way a decision that went on outside of this body?
Yes. It was done in Saline County District Court, but there is, under federal law with the Surface Transportation Board, once an abandonment is filed, there's a certain window of opportunity for someone to step forward, an entity, to try to rail bank that corridor, and that window has closed here, and that allowed these applicants to come forward and to convert this to private ownership.
I've kind of a procedural question on this, because reading through here and having viewed some of the proceedings in this and knowing that there's been some plat issues on this, and it looks like there's still some plat issues on this. As part of the application that the Planning Commission approved 8-0, were they not required to have this plat at that time, or?
They had a plat that defined the 4 boundaries of the parcel. They did not have a plat that identified or provided easements for all the public and franchise utilities. And as I explained to the Planning Commission, if they would move that forward, that the acceptance of utility easements was a role of the City Commission, not the Planning Commission, and that I would make sure that no plat went forward from them to the City Commission until all of those easements had been provided for and were in the right place and in the right dimensions.
And that's what we got today?
You do not have that in front of you today. It was received by me and distributed to the various utility providers so they could inform me whether they felt they were protected.
Okay. Yeah, I meant we as in the collective
Yes.
we. Okay. And I don't know that I've been involved, and maybe some of the other commissioners there have been involved with the postponing the consideration, what kind of motion that is. I mean, what kind of, does that just kind of put a block in the door so the door doesn't close, or what practical?
The practical purpose was so that the application could essentially be continued and would not die for failure to submit a plat within 40 days of the Planning Commission's recommendation. That if you did not acknowledge receipt of the recommendation and postpone consideration, then essentially the application would die and we'd start all over.
What if the information that went out to the different people that need to look at this plan comes back insufficient? And it says we need to take, is the block still in there? I mean, are we making a postponement based on this thing is done correct right now? There's no more going back at it?
Well, I'll defer that to Mr. Bankston, but because this is not a public hearing and it's not a scheduled public hearing, you could acknowledge receipt of the Planning Commission's recommendation, and you could say, we're not going to consider this, don't bring it back to us until you have a plat ready to go with it. You would not have to designate a hearing date or meeting date for that. You would simply direct staff not to bring it to you for consideration until it had a plat ready to go with it. That's what staff's been doing since the June 18th meeting, but because the 40 days was running out, we felt we should bring it to you so that the application simply didn't expire. Am I misstating that in terms of the postponement?
Oh, I don't think so. Just you're articulating that brought to mind something we hadn't discussed, and I just wondered if we should have an outside date so that at least it would come back before the
that
body.
That would be helpful for everyone. I will acknowledge, and it's as much planning staff's fault as anything, is that we accepted an application relating to the plat with this that was not complete and scheduled it on faith that it would become complete. And it did not occur, and we're still working at it, and this all started because we accepted the application that wasn't complete in the first place.
Any other questions for staff now that he's explained that, how that happened?
But I would agree with Mr. Bankston that it would be completely reasonable to set an outside date that says to be considered by us no later than
What,
a
40
certain
days?
date.
No. I'd just like to make a small comment on, I hear a lot about how staff is, you can't get staff to work with you, or staff, not necessarily your staff, but city staff and so on. And it seems like we kind of gave somebody a little extra time to give you something that, it's not in the ordinance. It says, hey, submit this thing and we'll get you in. And it says, we'll get you on the agenda when you have a complete submittal. And we let them kind of ride on that, which is out of the goodness of your office, and I think in a spirit of trying to work together. I think when you do those and it comes back that they don't submit it, and I don't think that this, and there may be circumstances on this project, but it seems like this has been a pattern on this project.
Is that something maybe we should take up with staff at a different time?
No.
Since that's a
No, it's not. I'm perfectly sure of what I'm saying here. So, but I'm just concerned that we have this process put into place, and I'm not I'm not altogether comfortable saying that we want to do something outside of what the ordinance, the subdivision ordinance says, and it says that these things will be submitted. It'll be placed on the agenda within X amount of days and be done. And this isn't a criticism towards staff, but I think we get ourselves into trouble when we go outside of what we require of everybody else. And I don't know how, I guess I'm still not clear on when it says postpone. Are we saying we want to, is there something in there that says we can take receipt of this? I just don't, I'm unclear on what exactly that means.
It says that the recommendation of the Planning Commission must be delivered to the City Commission within 40 days following the close of the Planning Commission hearing, which was June the 18th. So I counted days, and I determined that today was the last meeting that that recommendation could be delivered to you and still be within that 40-day window to give you the opportunity to choose what you wanted to do with the application. What that does is to say, you'll notice there's no ordinance attached. There's nothing that we're asking you to take any actual application on this, or the actual zoning application, but we're simply saying that you can acknowledge receipt of this, and you can say that we have met the requirement to have the recommendation put before you within 40 days, and it can come back on your agenda for consideration on the merits at a future date when we can join a proper plat with the zoning application. And I would just add that this is a little different because it's a single piece of property and it's not being done in 2 stages, but you will have applications that will come to you in the future that are a preliminary stage, and they will come to you for you to give an initial indication on whether you're supportive of the zoning change or supportive of annexation, and the developer will have 1 year from your preliminary consideration to complete the final platting of that property. That doesn't make sense to do that here because in theory we're talking about a simple 1-lot plat. But what is not simple here is that this used to be rail right-of-way, and it's crisscrossed by utilities, and there's no easements for those utilities, and we simply need to know where they are, where they cross the property, and create easements for them. So 1, the easements, the utilities that are in there are protected, and 2, so we don't inadvertently place a building over the top of an active utility line.
So Dean, kind of the short version of that, would you think the best thing to do would be option 1, which is what was recommended, which is just we acknowledge receipt, but we're going to send it back to the applicant to get the plat corrected and set postpone this meeting for a certain date in the future, of which at that time we'd expect to have the plat well in
Because
advance.
Then, if we followed option one, then the application to establish zoning and the application for authorizing the mayor to sign the plat would be ready to be considered on its merits, and we don't think it's ready to consider on its merits today or to report on. But I can report that since I wrote this report, I now have a drawing in hand that locates all those easements, and I was able to distribute that. So we are working in the right direction.
So what would a date on something like that be?
I would think that if not the 5th, then certainly the 12th or 19th of August would be
Okay.
reasonable dates for this to come back.
And does that date need to be stated in the action?
I think it would be helpful, yes.
Right, and probably then I would probably be better with the 19th because the 12th is when our budget's due, and I'm assuming that there'll be a lot in that process on that date.
Yeah,
on the
you should have a
12th,
few
so
actions.
maybe the 19th would be a better date.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to you. If this is a fairly simple action, which it may be, it probably doesn't make a lot of difference from our perspective of preparing it. So it's really up to you.
But I believe we would have a plat before you by the 19th that would show you where existing utilities and that we have correctly provided easements for all those items.
Any other questions for staff? Any public comment on this matter? Okay, I would go ahead and entertain Oh. Sorry, I looked down real quick to write down a date and didn't see it coming up to the stand. I apologize. I'm
That's all right.
sorry.
I'm Pete Earls with Earls Engineering.
Okay,
I'm 115 West Iron.
thank you.
I just got involved recently, but this survey was really done by Landmark Surveying. He did a boundary survey for him. Landmark Surveying was bought out by me earlier this year. And in the process of this project, they basically took a boundary survey and tried to turn it into a plat. Two problems with that is, one, the preliminary was never done. In other words, the utilities were never found. On a railroad right-of-way, like Dean stated, there are no easements. That's extremely unusual. So what the surveyors do is go out and they find all the easements on a property, and that'll tell them pretty much where utilities are. Well, on right-of-way for a railroad, there are no easements, and there is no documentation given by the railroad as far as what utilities were done. Bottom line is, between the time we purchased Landmark and I moved him out to Liberal, this project has somewhat been dropped in a little bit, and I apologize for that. Dean caught a hold of me on Friday, and I sent another surveyor out there and got all these utilities, and we're trying to get this cleaned up the way it should have been done. And I apologize. That was dropped. It was taken as a boundary and turned into a plat. You can't do that. You need a preliminary, and this one is additionally odd because it is a railroad right-of-way, and so there are no easements. As Dean stated, we did give him one on Friday that did have all the utilities located. The easements were moved to the correct location, and so we have no problem with proceeding, as Dean stated, with the option number one for the 19th. We just want to assure you that we will get this cleaned up and taken care of for you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'd bring that back to the commission and entertain a motion.
I move we approve the city, acknowledging receipt of the Planning Commission's recommendation regarding the zoning of this property, but postpone consideration of the application until a plat that accounts for all existing utilities is ready for the Commission's consideration, hopefully by August 19th.
I think, if I may, Mayor and Commissioner, that I don't know that hopefully is the word we want.
I was wondering.
After I said it, I thought, whoops, wrong word.
I thought that was probably
I know.
Bye.
Knowing you as I do, Commissioner Crawford, it doesn't surprise me that you would try to make that work.
Yeah. Maybe on,
but it,
Can you reword your motion?
Maybe, yeah.
I'll reword it. I move we acknowledge receipt of the Planning Commission's recommendation regarding the zoning of this property, but postpone consideration of the application until a plat that accounts for all existing utilities be ready for the Commission's consideration on August 19th.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We will have this back on August 19th. On to administration.
Item 8.1, authorize the purchase of a lighting control system for the Bicentennial Center.
Mr. Latham.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Do I say your name right?
Pretty
Okay,
close.
just-
Louthan.
Louthan.
Close enough.
Okay, you think I'd know that because you're your daughter.
Do you think
but
we could
I-
hire
I
some
messed it
Smiths
up.
or Jones for the,
Yeah.
we got Franz, Louthan, Luthen.
Yeah, I slaughter the English language. It's okay.
Thanks,
Go ahead,
thanks
Dion.
for having me up. The item you have before you today is the consideration of the purchase of a light control system for the Bicentennial Center. Give you a little bit of background and history. As it stands right now, there really is no system in place. The lights are either on or they're off. They're turned on via breakers or turned off via breakers. What the new system would allow us to do is bring some automation to it, have the ability to program in certain programs, if you will, for different events, whether it's a half house, full house, sporting event, different things like that, number one. The second piece, too, is it brings in remote technology where you can utilize, iPads, computer systems, different things like that to control the system. And then the last piece of it, it helps with energy efficiency, too, just from on-off standpoints. And the amount of burn you would use with the new lights that we've already purchased that you guys had authorized prior, meaning we don't have to run them at 100%. If 50% is adequate, we could set the system to run those at 50%. Additionally, things to consider here would be that this system does meet or exceed all of the standards that we set forth in the bid documents that we put out. It is recommended by the light manufacturer General Electric as a system that works well with their system. The folks from Global Spectrum reached out to numerous facilities who have this system in their facility and received very positive reviews. So we've received a lot of great feedback about those that are using it. We did only receive one bid, that is of note. However, having said that, we do believe that this bid is very competitive based upon our discussions with other folks, based upon looking at other systems that are out there, and the discussions that we've had in the industry. This was part of a $200,000 line item for the both light purchase and the control panel itself. We had spent about $117,000 of that to date. This is another $32,050 that would be added to that, so we would still come in under what that total would be projected at, or what we originally projected at. We've brought several items for you to think about and consider. First would be to approve the purchase of the system for project number 132993 from Gexpro in the amount of $32,050. We could reject the bid and bid at a later date, or you could provide another option or give further direction. And with that, I would open it up to questions.
Any questions for staff on this matter?
Just checking eBay to see if there's any for sale.
Okay. Nothing on Gexpro?
Nothing on
Okay.
nothing on eBay. So
Just a quick question on, just as this process moves forward, we have the lights purchased. We have, this is the controller, so to speak, the
Correct.
brains of the unit. And it looked like just, it kind of deals with some different lighting options at different acts. Is that right? Did I read that right? That different acts will be able to provide, so maybe we'll be able to attract different types of
I would say a lot more
entertainment, or what's the main benefit of that?
I would say a lot more robust and flexible system right now, on or off, where now you can pre-program a lot of the things that you would already use, so you're not burning up staff time to go in there and try to get things set right or positioned right. You can control those lights and set those pre-programs up on the front side for
Okay.
half house, full house.
So
sporting
these would
events,
be
et cetera.
used for more in-house stuff we do, like Bombers games and basketball tournaments and things like that. Okay, great. And then my last question would be on, we have all the equipment and so on, the installation of this is taken care of.
The installation of this right now is currently out to bid, which
Okay.
we'll bring back to you once we receive those. And I'm not positive. I think those come back July 30th is when those are slated to be back. So we would be back to you probably around the 5th for consideration on the actual installation itself, which the installation wouldn't begin until roughly the end of August. We have a window set aside between the end of August and early October for the installation of sound and lights.
Super.
based on our scheduling and what we've done there.
Thanks.
Any other questions for staff?
Thank
Any
you.
public comment on this matter? Nobody from Global Spectrum? Want to know? Okay. He always does. With that, I'd entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the purchase of Payne Sparkman Light Talk Lighting Control System, project number 13-2993 from Gex Pro in the amount of $32,050.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Do we have any other comments from the public today?
Other business?
Okay, any other business?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I move to recess into executive session for 40 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at 6:05?
Yes. Second?
Have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are going to go into executive session, but I do request a 5-minute break before executive session for everybody, please. Thank
Is
you.
there going to be any action afterwards?
Do we expect any action, legal action?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
We not care anymore. You know,